In the midst of winter, when snowflakes were descending from the clouds like feathers, a queen sat by her palace window. The frame of the window was black like ebony, and she was sewing shirts for her husband while gazing at the snow. While doing so, she accidentally pricked her finger and 3 drops of blood fell on the white snow. The red drops appeared beautiful on the white snow, and the queen wished for a child with skin as white as snow, hair as black as ebony, and lips as red as blood. Soon after, she gave birth to a daughter who was named Snow White due to her appearance: white skin, red cheeks, and black hair. Unfortunately, the queen passed away during childbirth. Roughly a year later, the king got married to another woman who was very beautiful. But her pride and arrogance made her intolerant of anyone being more attractive than her. She possessed a magical mirror and would often ask it, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the most beautiful of them all?" The mirror would always answer, "You, my queen, are the most beautiful of all." This response pleased her greatly, and she believed it to be true. As Snow White grew up, she became more and more beautiful, and by the time she reached the age of 7, she was as beautiful as the shining sun and even more attractive than the queen herself. The queen, on the other hand, became insecure and repeatedly asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?" The mirror responded with, "Yesterday the queen was the fairest, but now they say Snow White is the fairest of them all." This response caused the queen to become extremely envious and resentful towards Snow White. Her hatred for the young girl grew so strong that she could not stand to see her anymore. She instructed a huntsman to take Snow White to the forest and kill her, demanding her heart and tongue as proof. The huntsman agreed to do as she said, but when he took out his knife to execute her, Snow White pleaded with him, crying and promising to run away and never return if he spared her life. The huntsman was moved by Snow White's plea and her beauty, and he felt sorry for her. He said, "All right, go then, poor child." But he worried that she would not survive in the wild forest. Even so, he was relieved that he did not have to hurt her. Suddenly, a young boar appeared and started to charge towards them. The huntsman quickly killed the boar and took its heart and tongue as proof of Snow White's death. He brought them to the queen to show that he had completed the task she had given him. Snow White was now alone and without a mother. She was overwhelmed with sadness and confusion, not knowing which direction to take. She ran until she could no longer move her feet, and as it was getting dark, she stumbled upon a small, elegant cottage. Inside, everything was tidy and small. In the center of the room was a little table with 7 little plates, each with a spoon, knife, and fork, and 7 little mugs. Against the wall were 7 little beds lined up in a row, each with Snow White sheets. Snow White was hungry and thirsty. So she ate a small amount of porridge from each plate and drank a drop of wine from each mug, so as not to take all of one person's share. Exhausted, she tried each of the 7 little beds. The first was uncomfortable, the second was too long, the fourth was too short, and the fifth was too hard. The 7th one was perfect, so she snuggled into it and said her prayers before falling asleep. As darkness fell, the owners of the cottage came home. They were 7 dwarfs who worked in the mountains searching for gold and silver. They lit 7 little lamps and noticed that someone had been in their home as things were not in the same order as they had left them. The first dwarf asked who had been sitting on his chair, the second asked who had been eating from his plate, and the third asked who had been nibbling his bread. The fourth asked who had been eating his porridge, the fifth questioned who had been meddling with his fork, while the sixth complained about someone cutting with his knife. The seventh dwarf asked who had been drinking out of his mug. The first dwarf then noticed that someone had been lying on his bed as the sheets were messed up. The other dwarfs checked their beds and found that someone had been lying in each of them too. The seventh dwarf ran up to his bed and found Snow White sleeping in it. He called the other dwarfs, who were amazed and held up their lamps to see the little girl. The dwarfs were amazed by Snow White's beauty and did not want to disturb her sleep. The dwarf whose bed she was sleeping in shared his bed with each of his companions for an hour each throughout the night. The next morning, Snow White woke up and was frightened to see the seven dwarfs. However, they were friendly and asked her name and why she had come to their cottage. Snow White told them about how her stepmother wanted to kill her, but she had escaped and wandered around until she found their home. The dwarfs then asked if she would stay with them and take care of their household tasks such as cooking, cleaning, and sewing. They promised to provide for her and keep her safe from harm. Snow White agreed to their proposal and stayed with them during the day, while the dwarfs worked in the mountains. Snow White was left alone, and they warned her to be careful of her stepmother, who might try to find her and harm her. They instructed her not to let anyone into the cottage. The queen thought that she had consumed Snow White's heart and tongue, and as a result, she considered herself the most beautiful woman in the world. One day, she stood in front of her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?"